Matthias, everyone. Matthias, so we need to do the jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You saw the jokes. Yeah. Like, do you think it would work?
They all worked today, right? They all worked really well. Like, I love those jokes, actually.
Well, yeah. Let's try. So we have one submission. It's a community-driven project here at this point. By the end of the conference, we'll have like a whole GitHub repository for that, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. So, Matthias.
Yeah.
Why do Norwegian ships have QR codes on them?
So they can Scandinavian.
Kindly submitted by Jake. Okay, we have one more.
Really nice.
One more. Matthias.
Yeah.
You can also come over because there's a column now.
Yeah.
Where did Gray 500 and Button Primary go to on their first date?
Is Brad here?
No. Brad?
A naming convention, I guess.
Yeah, well, okay, when you get this sort of response, it's probably time to move on. All right, excellent. So moving on, right, the web. We all love the web. We all care about the web. And the web has been evolving significantly over the last couple of years and decades, of course. And very often it's very difficult to just know, so what is the state of things on the one hand, but also what would be kind of the right way to design and build for the web. We always talk about, you know, designers and building and kind of this poor flow in between, how do we make the handoff and all, but where are we and how do we make the best out of that? How do we paint with the web? And that's exactly what the next session is about. Matthias is an independent UX designer, and I also know that you can play piano, or you used to play piano.
I used to play, yeah.
For 10 years?
Yes, as a young kid and then growing up, yeah.
So...
Actually, I can't play from the notes, so yeah, it's all gone. So if any one of you is still playing their instrument, I encourage you to learn also how to play by the notes so that you don't lose it. And that's actually something I would love to do at some time. So,
okay. Yeah. Well, if we cannot play with the if we can't play with piano, we can at least paint with the web. So please give a wonderful round of applause to Matthias.
Thank you. So, thank you, Vitaly. Welcome, everyone. It's really, really nice to be here in Freiburg. I'm actually based not so far away in Stuttgart, and I enjoyed this day immensely, seeing all those amazing talks by all the speakers, and also I had a lot of interesting conversations already, and I guess that's also what conferences are about, that we all have a lot of amazing conversations at the after party, for example, but also a few drinks. And I realize I'm the last thing between you and those conversations and drinks. And so let's not waste too much time. My name is Matthias. I'm a user experience designer, web design engineer, and a teacher for interface prototyping. I also run workshops on modern accessible web design, user experience design, web design engineering. I am Matthias Ott at Mastodon Social, and I also have a personal website, just like Anna, matthiasott.com. And I'm actually quite passionate about personal sites, and this is why I created a newsletter about it. Every now and then I send out a new issue covering various topics about personal sites and owning your web presence, so feel free to sign up if you're interested. But now let's talk about painting. Not the paintings all around here, which are also very beautiful, but this one. Can anyone guess the artist of this piece? No? I think I heard it? Yeah, that's the right answer. Gerhard Richter, one of the most important living German artists. This is one of his pieces in Dresden, in the Albertinum Gallery. I took this photo there. Have you ever seen Gerhard Richter painting, though? So, like, how does he do it? Because it's phenomenal to watch. There's also a documentary I encourage you to watch. Because usually he starts his abstract paintings by just applying a lot of oil paint on the canvas with a thick brush, and then he starts to scrape and smear and drag the paint around with such a huge squeegee, it's called. And then he takes a step back and he looks at the result, and he looks at it and says, thinks, what just happened to the canvas, to the composition, to the overall image, the picture? So what looks interesting, what is maybe the next move that he could take. So there's a lot of intention and carefulness in this process, but he also follows his intuition, and he lets go of control to let things happen that are really interesting and exciting and new. And you could say that this is maybe the ultimate creative process, right? It's a constant conversation between the artist and his piece. So no work of art arrives fully formed in the mind of its creator. It's always this constant conversation, this back and forth, reflection and revision of what's right in front of you. And this is also what makes deep creative work so rewarding, and how we as humans learn and evolve constantly. A lot about Richter's creative process reminds me of working on the web as well. Like, we also have a creative process. We have quirks of the mediums and bugs and happy accidents. And if we're honest, it's also sometimes like how we as designers like to think of ourselves, right? We are creative minds in control of the process. We are painting with the web. But in fact, we aren't very often. There are huge differences between how Richter is working with his canvas and how we are painting with the web. And first, there is the canvas itself. Because Richter starts every of his paintings with a blank canvas with fixed dimensions, clear boundaries. We all know that. But on the web, our canvas is radically different. It's not fixed. It scrolls, it zooms, it spans an unpredictable landscape of devices and contexts, as you can see on this photo that Brad took at a conference in 2012, so 13 years ago. How about today? This is a graphic I created in 2018 based on an earlier one from a talk by Frank Chimero. And what you're seeing here is a snapshot of all the screen sizes I could find back then based on the data I got from various websites that listed device specs in 2018. But even then, it was obvious that there is a lot of fragmentation. But then I took the data that Andy Bell and his colleagues collected at Set Studio in the UK for their brilliant site viewports.fyi, and I updated my own graphic with the more than 2,300 different viewport sizes in their data set, and this is the result. This is our canvas on the web, right? It is unpredictable and edgeless and fluid. We all know this. So how does the right way to paint on this canvas look like? And I want you to be really, really honest with yourself. Does it look like this? Like hands up, who knows this view and who still designs or gets designs handed off? Right, yes. This is how we work in 2025. This is how the industry, for the most part, works. It's been 15 years since Ethan Marcotte published his groundbreaking article, Responsive Web Design. And indeed, most of us are building responsive websites now. But instead of really approaching designing for the web that it has a fluid canvas, we are working with it as it has a fixed canvas, like we were designing for a fixed canvas. We are still painting pretty pictures of websites, static pictures of websites. Okay, granted, we've all seen Brad's talk. We are also painting static pictures of components very often, and this is a great thing because we have reusable modules so that we can build products and features and interfaces much more quickly and more efficient, but it doesn't necessarily make our designs less static, and we are often still tackling this fluid medium with static and linear waterfall processes of the past. I think you have all experienced this. We create abstractions of the final medium instead of really working directly with it. And this brings me to the second huge difference between Richter's process and how we design on the web today, and that's the material itself. Because as we have seen, painting is a constant dialogue between the artist and the material. It's immediate and unfiltered and honest, materially honest. But on the web, we sometimes have really a broken relationship with our material. We are using static tools to create at a distance instead of really working with the real web that is non-linear and dynamic and interactive and fluid, really. And by using those static tools, we are often, also by separating design and development, breaking a crucial feedback loop. We are limiting our ability really to have this constant dialogue, this creative dialogue with the web. And this also prevents us from making well-informed design decisions going forward, because we are all always on a path somewhere or on our way. design and development is a series of decisions. So how can you make the right decisions based on assumptions rather than insights from the real material? And this is problematic because just like tech, the web platform, it evolves at an unprecedented speed now. Just take CSS as an example. Many of you might experience the same. We can now do things with CSS and other platform features that were unthinkable just a few years ago. The very foundations of how we understand and write CSS have changed radically, and you could easily say that CSS is now the most powerful design tool for the web. The features of CSS are no longer holding us back in what we can do, as it used to be. We no longer have to hack our way around the limitations and quirks of CSS. But instead, very often, the design tools are the limiting factor. And this is becoming a problem because the gap between what designers design and what's possible, what would be possible to create with the web platform has never been wider. We could be creating much more resilient and accessible and beautiful websites, but instead we're delivering subpar experiences very often. So the question remains, what if we change that? What would happen if we stopped treating the web like a blank canvas to paint on and started treating it like a material to build with? This is from Frank Chimero's fantastic talk, The Web's Grain. I highly encourage you to watch it, a few years old. So to properly design for a medium, to properly paint with a medium, you need to understand it. You need to understand what the qualities of the material are you are working with. You need to understand what the constraints are you are working with. And a large part of this understanding will come from working with the material, but we also have to get a basic understanding of why the technologies we are working with were built the way they are. And for this, we have to go back to the early 90s, and this young fella. This is, of course, Tim Berners-Lee, a young computer scientist from England, and he was working back then at CERN, not far away in Geneva, this research facility for particle physics where they are smashing particles together to increase our understanding of the universe. This is where the Large Hadron Collider, LHC, is located, the world's largest and most powerful particle accelerator, the world's largest machine. It consists of a 27-kilometer ring of superconducting magnets with a number of accelerating structures to boost the energy along the way. I mean, where else could the World Wide Web have been invented, if not here, right? The World Wide Web. Actually, it was invented here, at this next machine at the center. This is where Tim Berners-Lee developed his little hypertext project, and first he thought of naming it the Information Mine, or short, TIM. But eventually he modestly called the project the World Wide Web, and he developed the hypertext transfer protocol, HTTP, and invented the concept of URLs that we are all using now to create links between documents. And at the core of the project was this new language, HTML, that he created. It was a really very simple format that was all about adding markup tags around text to give those pieces of text meaning. So a piece of text could be marked as a heading, another one as a paragraph, a clickable link, and so on. The elements in early HTML really were structural and logical and semantic rather than presentational, and this was by design. Because in his first proposal for the World Wide Web project, he wrote, we should work toward a universal linked information system in which generality and portability are more important than fancy graphics techniques and complex extra facilities. Generality and portability. So Tim Berners-Lee knew the web would only succeed if information was truly portable, able to flow to any device, right? And HTML should convey document structure, therefore, and not presentational details. And this was completely opposite to print. It was really a radical shift where designers control everything. The web was built to be flexible, and that flexibility actually became the web's superpower. It made it robust and resilient, and the idea was really the web is for everyone. If only it was, right? But it turned out a lot of people also wanted to adjust the presentation of web documents as well, in particular fonts and colors, and so HTML slowly started to become cluttered with purely presentational tags like font and small and big and blink, and it was really on a downwards move away from a semantic structural language towards a presentation-oriented language, and this threatened device independence and accessibility and the reuse of content. Thanks to Zach Leatherman, I don't know if he's here, no, for this code snippet, by the way. And so something needed to be done. And in 1994, Sir Tim was joined by this young man, Håkon Vium Lie, a young programmer from Norway, who in 1994, published the first proposal for what would later become CSS. At the time, style sheets, by the way, were documents that designers gave to printers that contained key styling rules, like the typefaces, line heights, heading formats, and stuff like this. So Håkon took this idea of style sheets and applied it to the web. So browsers would receive an ordered list of style sheets, and those defined how the document would be rendered. But again, there was a crucial difference from print. The idea was that the user could supply their own style sheet, which could take over full control over the presentation, or more likely let the website style sheets have the most influence. And in his PhD thesis, which he wrote about CSS, obviously, Håkon wrote, negotiating between the needs and wishes of readers and authors was one of the main ambitions of CSS. If successful, authors would get their fair share of influence over the presentation and would not feel compelled to use presentational HTML and other CSS tricks, and readers, on the other hand, would be served documents in a form in which they could choose between accepting the author's suggested presentation or specify their own. Two really interesting words here, influence and suggested presentation. And actually, this idea of influence was central to this first proposal. Like in this line where a font size for a heading is set, and you almost get what's happening. It doesn't look like the CSS we are using today, but at the end of this line, there is this 100%, and that's actually the influence that this line should have. It's basically unimportant, and in this proposal, there was even this graphic, which looks like range sliders. Like, for example, in the case of the font, the author would have 64% influence, the user gets the rest. I have no idea how this would look like if, let's say, the author defined Comic Sans as the typeface for the document, but the user, Manuel, where are you? Yeah, he loves the lobster font so much, right? So nobody would want to see this, right? I needed to try, but yeah. I sincerely apologize to all the typographers in the room, but I guess you get the underlying idea, yeah? It's also clear why some parts of the proposal didn't make it into the final versions of CSS, but the idea is that on the web, the influence over the presentation is shared, and this is true to this day. Author control on the web means shared author-user influence because content and presentation come together on the user's device. So both authors and users can influence how things look, and that makes personalized experiences possible. But unlike in traditional publishing, where authors have control over everything, this keeps the whole design flexible. And this idea of flexibility and of universal access was the reason CSS was designed this way. It needed to work for multiple output devices, and so on the web, to this day, the browser provides a default style sheet. Users can adjust the presentation to their liking, for example, by overriding colors and font sizes, and we as web authors, we get to suggest a bit as well. And the process of bringing all those origins together is actually called cascading. That's the C in CSS. That's why it's called this way. So if you use style sheets properly to suggest the appearance of a page, not to control the appearance of a page, and you don't rely on your style sheet to convey information, then your pages will work fine in any browser, past or future. This is actually a quote from the past. John Alsop wrote this 25 years ago in his seminal article, A Dao of Web Design. Who has read this article? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Of almost 300 people in the room, right? I encourage you to read it, because it's, I guess, required reading for everyone. It's a piece of history. In this article, John argues that we should embrace the inherent qualities of the web. 25 years ago, other than in print, the web is flexible, but rather than thinking of this as a weakness, as so many people still do today, yeah, we should see it as a unique strength of the web. It makes the web the most accessible and robust of all mediums. And this fundamentally also changes the role of us, all of us as creators, because on the web we are not controlling and dictating the experience, we are suggesting it very often. And Jeremy Keith likes to call this declarative design, this approach to designing with the web, meaning that you don't try to precisely control or dictate how something should look. You are declaring an intent. You are providing boundary conditions. You suggest parameters that shape the design and its behavior. But then you also let the browser figure out or the device of the user how the design works in a certain context. You always keep in mind what would happen if, something goes wrong or users override your design with their preferences. This is the materially honest approach to painting and designing with the web. Just like Gerhard Richter, you're giving up control, but you're gaining so much more. And so building and painting with the web as a material really means to start with the most robust layer first by painting a semantic structure in HTML with native HTML elements. And those elements provide a lot of features out of the box for free, by the way, like keyboard validation, form validation, keyboard focus management, accessibility features like that. And then we are building on top of that with declarative CSS. And following Keith's law, for the things that only JavaScript can do, we use JavaScript, the most powerful, but also maybe the most fragile of the languages on the web. And on top of that, we use ARIA roles and attributes to make our sites more accessible, but please only where they are really necessary. We need to know what we are doing there. We are progressively enhancing the experience. But now let's look at a few examples of how we can use the power of the platform to really paint with the web as a material, right? Just a few examples. The first one is typography, because when it comes to typography on the web, this lack of control is still a real issue for many designers and stakeholders. I guess you've all been in this situation. In print design, we have full control over every detail, every typographic detail. On the web, however, we have to somehow accept a dance with uncertainty. And this dance with uncertainty is apparent in even one of the first lines of every CSS file, almost. Instead of just dictating one typeface for the font family, we can suggest a list of typefaces that the browser should try to use. So in case 1000 by Christoph Köberlin is not available, we can try to use Helvetica. And if that isn't available, then please, browser, try to use Arial. And if that's not available, use any sans serif font on the system. I don't care. But instead of assuming full control, we can offer a set of suggestions that makes our typography work in different contexts. And the same idea can be applied to font sizes, the scaling of our type using fluid web typography, which allows us to scale type based on the size of the viewport. This is how it usually looks like. How many of you have worked with fluid type before? Yes, okay, quite a few. Instead of adding just more and more breakpoints manually to the design, we create a system in which elements scale proportionally on the viewport size, and this idea can not only be used for font sizes, but actually works also really well for the spacing of our sites. And this is how fluid type is done today with modern CSS. Usually we are using the clamp function to calculate a font size that adds a fraction of the viewport width to a base font size, but we're also making sure it never gets smaller than our minimum and never larger than the max font size. And using relative font size makes sure that it stays accessible, because we can still respond to font size changes by the users. Now, this idea of fluidly scaling the type is then combined with another idea that is really centuries old, and that's a typographic scale. In the 16th century already, European typographers developed a series of typeface sizes, a scale that allowed them to work with harmonious sizes between the individual font sizes. So the underlying idea is that numbers that are related by a certain ratio will feel harmonious, just like in music. And in a so-called modular scale, use a multiplier to create a set of numbers with a harmonious relationship. With a multiplier of 2, you get an octave. With a multiplier of 1.5, you get what's known as a perfect fifth. And we can now combine those two ideas, and we can scale our type up fluidly, or headings, for example, with clamp. And then we're using a modular scale to create a system of harmonious font sizes. And the final trick then is that we are using different scales for our min and max viewports. So for the smallest viewport, the multiplier could be 1.2. For the largest viewport, 1.33. And then, we are interpolating between those sizes. And this way we can make use of the full size of the viewport on larger screens, but on small screens our typography has less contrast and is more dense, so to say, and it's a really nice solution. Works really well. You have to get your head around it a bit. As a designer, I have given up control over how large the type exactly is on a particular viewport. I could calculate it, but you can also just trust the browser in this case that it will work fine on any system or screen. And luckily, you don't have to come up with everything around fluid type yourself. There are calculators you can use, like this one, probably the most well-known, Utopia by James Gilliard and Tris Mudford. You enter all the values, and Utopia outputs the CSS for you. But we can even do something like this with CSS, painting with the web. Instead of scaling our type up linearly, We can also use a curve. So this means that our type scales up more quickly on smaller viewports, but on larger viewports, it then grows more slowly. And the trick here is to use a trigonometric function like the sine function, and this part of the sine function, actually. And those functions are also the basis for many animation features, like in GZAP. Many animation libraries use this, also the easing calculations we're using. And in our case, we can use the min and max viewport width as the starting and end points, and use the sine curve to interpolate between the values. And trigonometric functions like the sine function are available in all major browsers since 2023. So you can use them in projects, try them out, maybe in production. It depends on how many browsers you need to support. But this is how the CSS behind the final calculation looks like. A bit intimidating, I know. Don't worry, I won't explain every line now. If you're interested in how it works exactly, you can watch my CSS Day talk from last year, or talk to me later, or take a look at this code pen as well. I will also share the slides in the end. I would be a bit cautious before using something like this in production. Still, it is supposed to show you what's possible. But really, this is programming, but it's also design, and it's also built directly and judged and evaluated and refined in the browser directly, painting with the web. And we can take this idea even further, like in this example. Although all we are doing is rotating our device and the screen size hasn't changed, the typography appears radically different in size. So if we take the viewport width and the viewport height, and maybe we could also then take the square root of this, then we have a value we can base our fluid type calculations on that is more appropriate for different screens, maybe. And we could call it our space index, for lack of a better word. And if we base our fluid type calculations on this space index, this is what we get. Please see this as a prototype as well. And if you're doing stuff like this, check for accessibility support so that the font sizes can scale up properly to 200%, for example. This is an accessibility requirement. So it's a prototype. And we're not even talking about variable fonts yet. There are so many typography-related features today in CSS, like text wrap, the line height unit, text box trim, so many things you can explore and try out and get creative with, but only in the browser for the most part. The same thing goes for color, where the web platform can outperform design tools at the moment. Most of you are writing their colors still in one of those ways, probably, but they all share the same limitation, and that's sRGB, the sRGB color space. If this is the range of human color perception, then this is sRGB. It's really, really small, and this is actually what the S stands for. There are larger color spaces in our devices also that allow us to work with much more vibrant colors, like P3. The display P3 color space has around 50% more volume. Our design tools aren't quite there yet. You can switch Figma to P3, but it will tell you that P3 isn't recommended for web design, and so you have to rely on something else. In CSS, however, we can use new color functions like OKLCH that work with the display P3 color space. And OKLCH is really nice. It's a so-called perceptually uniform color space. It's really good at reproducing different colors that have a similar perceived lightness. So the L stands for lightness, the C stands for chroma, so the saturation of the color, how colorful it is, and H stands for the hue angle, so where on the color wheel are we. And it is OK because it's a version of LCH that is more OK in how perceptually uniform it is. That's the actual reason, and this is how you write OKLCH colors. The first value, lightness, is going from 0 to 100%, or you can write it as a decimal value between 0 and 1. The chroma value ranges from 0 to theoretically infinity, but in practice it stops around 0.5, depending on the color. And the hue value goes from 0 to 360. And you can also use it with transparency values, as you can see here. You can use OKLCH in production now. You could, for example, check for support with add supports and update custom property. And the nice thing about OKLCH is also that it creates much more perceptually uniform gradients. So the projection, I guess, doesn't show this properly. Vitaly, is this an OKLCH projector? No? Maybe this one is a bit better, I don't know. Yeah, but the gradient in OKLCH has much more vibrant colors than the others, and this is also because OKLCH does, so to say, not take the shortest path from one color to the next, right through the mud, but it goes around the color wheel of the color space, and so the colors stay vibrant. It's currently not possible to reproduce such gradients reliably in a tool like Figma, and so we need to use and evaluate those gradients directly in the browser. there are a few tools you can use also to pick and choose colors in the OKLCH color space, and fallbacks like this color tool by Evil Martians, oklch.com. And you can also use Chrome DevTools now to inspect OKLCH colors and even see the color contrast ratio for accessibility. If you want to use OKLCH to create a whole palette of colors, which is also really cumbersome to do in Figma at the moment, you can use a tool like Atmos, and this is also one of the biggest benefits of OKLCH. You can create color palettes that are much more accessible because you have control over contrasts, better control. Here, for example, you can check against WCAG 3 and 2 requirements, and it's an accessible, much more accessible color palette. But here's the thing, you can also paint color palettes yourself in the browser with CSS. There are a few ways to do it. For example, the color mix function that lets you mix two colors together. But another one is the relative color syntax, or just relative colors. They are really powerful because you can easily create complements and variations of existing colors, like lighter, darker, more saturated, transparent, and so on. And it's super convenient also, therefore, for color palette creation. And this is how you could do it. So if you're using the relative color syntax, you are usually defining a new color based on an origin color with a function like OKLCH and the from keyword. So you tell the browser you would like to create this color from an origin color, like here this is Indigo custom property, and then you provide the output value for each individual channel. You can leave each channel as is, like here, LCH, or you can also change one of those channels here, like we're using lightness values from 10 to 100%. And the resulting color palette has the same chroma and hue values, and this is how it looks like if you use this for different colors. Again, stuff like this is only possible to really explore and test directly in the browser, painting with the web as a material. In case you want to learn more about color, the state of color on the web, watch my friend Manuel's talk. Watch my friend Manuel's talk from last year's Beyond Tellerrand Berlin, because he even talked about color fonts and explained them in really the best way possible, I think. And also make sure to read this amazing blog post by Eric Portis, OK Color Spaces. He includes a lot of interactive three-dimensional demos, but he also brilliantly explains color gamuts, color spaces, this complicated stuff in plain language. A fantastic post. And now, those were just two areas, and I could go on. And one of the areas I want to quickly want to talk about is layout, because I guess it is really important to talk about, because there are many designers in the room. Maybe also a show of hands quickly. No, not, okay, perfect. Because I guess there are so many amazing layout tools we have at our disposal on the web today, right? You can be really creative. You get creative with layout on the web. But for this to happen, designers must know what's possible. And this is why I need to talk about CSS Grid, because CSS Grid lets us do things that are powerful but impossible to do in most modern design tools. I know Figma just released CSS Grid. It's nice. It's really an improvement. But it's also not quite there. It's not CSS Grid. And the majority of designers still has no idea what's possible with CSS Grid today. I also see this in my workshops from talking to designers. Because just to give you an idea of what you can do, you can create fully responsive fluid layouts that dynamically wrap and change the number of columns with just one line of CSS. As some of you might know, by using the repeat function with the autofill or autofit keyword and the min-max function that defines how small or large our columns can become. I also need to look this up every time. Or we can create columns that grow and shrink at different rates. Some are fixed, some are fluid, some disappear completely when we define min and max values. For the containers, we can let them grow from the outside in, but also from the inside out. So we can do really crazy stuff. And this example was from Jen Simmons' fantastic Layout Lab website, which is not new, but still a great resource because it contains so many useful demos and prototypes using CSS Grid that really show what's possible. We can also make things overlap with Grid, which is also really nice. We can name the areas in our grid and rearrange and move things around depending on the context. We can break out of a main column when the viewport gets larger, like Tyler Sticker showed here. Or, there's just so much you can do 2 years ago, however, the adoption of CSS Grid was still very low. It seems to have caught up a bit recently, but in the latest State of CSS survey, 7% of people still answered that CSS Grid is their favorite new CSS feature. Like, all major browsers support Grid since 2017, so for 8 years now, and globally almost 100% of users have a browser that supports it, so we can use it, and once designers know what's possible, usage might go up even more. The same goes for Subgrid, which finally completes Grid and lets us do things like not only use a grid for the direct children of a container, but also actually use it further down in the tree. So like in this layout, the cards can inherit grid rows of the parent grid, and we have images and type that nicely aligns. And we can even use different gaps within our subgrids, or combine this with container queries, a feature we've waited forever to get, but now we're not really using it. We can change the appearance of an element based on the size, and soon, also very soon, the style of a container it is in. Like here, the mother of all container query demos, a card, depending on how large the container is. In this case, the width of the grid columns, we are changing color, or where the heading sits, or also the layout of our component. And by using container queries, we can therefore use our cards in very different contexts without having to specifically know where the card will be placed. And there are so many more areas that will benefit from painting with the web directly in the browser, and where using static tools often can't compete at the moment. Accessibility, testing accessibility, getting your head around accessible forms, testing native inputs, interactivity of components, right? Animation, how does the animation work? Performance, lazy loading, and stuff like this. So all those areas are really vital areas where we can build with the web as a material, and it will hugely enhance the user experience, which is, again, an accessibility feature, of course. But the question is, does all of this then mean that we need to ditch our static design tools? This is what I'm saying, and stop using Figma and paint everything in the web directly in the browser? Not at all. I really know that, for one, those tools will improve, definitely. Tools like PenPod and also Figma are adding interesting features all the time, and we will still need those tools to just push around things visually, explore design directions. It has a part in the process, and of course we also need to get approval for our designs from clients. But beyond that, we really need to think about what our tool set for designing and building on the web should be, and adjust it accordingly. So we are tool makers and tool users, so what is our tool set? For one, we need to, as we have seen, use HTML and CSS much earlier in the process, so that we are able to make more informed and practical design decisions early in the process, not when all the blank static pages are already filled with the paint. And for this, there is a brilliant tool that industrial designers have been using for decades to explore materials and evaluate and iterate solutions and test them with real users. Prototyping is where ideas can come to life, and we can make sure that we are building the right thing, but most importantly, you can very quickly build little prototypes with the real material yourself, for example in CodePen, and then use the insights you gain to influence your decisions directly. You can work with the web platform without having to build the final real thing, and all the things I showed you before were basically just little prototypes. And anything can be a prototype, really. You can build your prototypes with a low or high fidelity. You can build them with a narrow or wide scope, typography, color prototypes, whatever it is. But you need to build them and then decide in the browser what works and what doesn't. And not necessarily in static design tools that are only an abstraction, especially in those areas where the tools fall short. You pick those areas. And it's actually there's a name for this way of working at the intersection of design and development, and that's design engineering. Or you could also say web design engineering. And practicing web design engineering can mean that we hire people, design engineers who know how to prototype and build web components with the web. But they also build bridges between designers and devs. But it also means that we all have to get a little bit better at design engineering collectively, as teams, as people with different skill sets. We are all working together. And it might mean that we let the devs design sometimes, really, that they develop a better understanding of the basics of design. We need more creative developers who have a basic understanding of typography and colors and all the things design includes. And it also might mean, and you might know what's coming, that we let the designers code. And I really mean this. I'm not talking about production code necessarily. I'm talking about not being put into boxes where designers only design and developers only write code. I'm talking about getting your hands dirty yourself, right? Exploring stuff yourself, about understanding the concepts behind things like fluid type and color, modern CSS layout, accessibility, animation, so much more, but in the browser, because a very wise man once said, telling web designers they don't need to worry about about code is like telling architects they don't need to worry about steel, wood, or physics. Or telling Gerhard Richter he doesn't need to worry about oil paint. The web is our material. We need to know how it behaves. We need to acquire a first-hand knowledge of what it means to design and paint with the web. And now, I guess, is the perfect time to get started with learning design, coding for the web, because there has never been more information out there about how to do this. I used to go to the library and the book wasn't there about HTML. You just do a quick search on any topic today and you will find an enormous amount of stuff to learn, not only on Smashing Magazine, articles, tutorials, videos, workshops, courses, you name it. There is really no barrier to learning more. And also, by the way, we need all of your expertise also to evaluate and correct and correct and correct again the hallucinated output of AI, as Brad showed us this morning. But there's probably no better way to get your hands dirty than a real project with real content, where you can build a structure with HTML and learn and explore CSS and JavaScript yourself. And here's the thing, we all have or can have such a project. It's right there in front of you. This is my personal website. I updated it on Sunday, actually, after almost 10 years. This is how long it takes me to redesign my website. And on this website, I'm using a lot of the things I showed you today. I'm using one of my favorite typefaces, Nahen Tresor by Christoph Köberlin, as a variable font. Then I'm using fluid type for the typography of the site, but also the spacing of the site. I explored this stuff on my personal website, a lot of things for the first time. I defined a color palette in OKLCH. I implemented those colors on various aspects of the site. For example, those kind of, let's see. I was talking too fast. Smashing hover effects like this one here or that one. I also used those colors to create a light and a dark mode for the site. Finally, you can switch the design to a dark mode, also respecting the automatic system setting. You can also try out CSS Subgrid on your site. Use CSS Grid for the first time, right? And if you're really adventurous and also a little bit too obsessed with audio plugins at the moment, you can also build something like this on your personal site, like a hardware-like style mixer enhancer for the website. It's not the CR78 from this morning. Completely useless, but a lot of fun. You can also get your head around web components, how they work, and create a rotary knob web component that you can use to adjust the pitch, the hue of the colors on your site using CSS filters or the saturation, maybe. You can adjust the line height and spacing of all the elements on the site. Just try around and changing custom properties and variables in the CSS of JavaScript of your site. There is also a grid value that changes the dynamic range of the typography, let's say, so how bold the variable fonts are and also how large the ratio of the fluid type is. And maybe you also want to try out SVG filters to make your site completely unusable using displacement map filters like this. Or also you might, let's turn this down again, or also you might just want to add a little sparkle to the site because you found a code pen from someone else who did it, and then you manipulated the paths, the shapes inside of the code pen, and then if you turn it up too much, it's maybe a little too much, right? So let's turn it down again. A little bit of this is probably enough. And you can also add a dry-wet mix knob, many audio plugins have this to blend in part of the adjusted signal into the original design signal, and also bypass the whole stuff with a power button and reset it in case you totally messed up. Right. So why am I showing you this? Because your personal website, also as Anna has shown, is the perfect place to play and explore. This is where you can do whatever you want, where you can try out what you are curious about. It's your playground to tinker with fluid type and colors and layout, animations, accessibility features. You can improve the performance of your site, the structure of your HTML. It's your place to take risks, to create opportunities, to create something that is really funny and useless and silly and wonderful. And there has never been a better time to get started with your personal site. Also because we need you and many, many more to keep the web open and diverse and really fun and independent. And you can start off small with just a plain HTML file. Talk to your developer how you can get started as a designer, maybe. Or you can take a look into static site generators like 11t, a CMS, like Kirby, Craft CMS. There's so many options out there. But whatever steps you take, I look forward to seeing what all of you will be painting with the web on your personal sites. And if you do, don't forget to send me the URL. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Matthias.
Thank you.
Would you like to join me? No, as you wish. Okay, so there is a note. I don't even know if it's a question. It's more like a statement.
Okay.
Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Let developers design ... That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I work as a freelancer in very different teams all the time, right? And from personal experience, it really makes sense to talk to each other as much as possible, and to also learn from each other as much as possible. And I see this all the time, that people, maybe they would be open to learning, for example, as a developer, a bit of design, but then they are told, no, that's not your area of expertise, right? And so they don't even try to think about it. And sometimes this even starts at school, where you want to try out something, but your teacher or peers or parents or whoever, they tell you, no, that's not your thing. You are good at maths, right?
Yeah.
And I truly believe that you don't need to do this, but it will definitely improve collaboration and the end result if, for example, developers have better knowledge around all the things related to typography and colors and things like this. Because then they don't just blindly follow the instructions, but they can think for themselves, which is really important.
I think it's also just about collaboration in many ways, because of course we have the better handouts with dev mode and Figma and things like that and so on and so forth. But I think that just having this bit of better understanding on both sides can go really, really far. I think like most teams that are really great at collaboration, like avoiding all the usual friction points and so on, are the ones where you actually have this sort of understanding, I guess, on both sides of how things work. Even although you don't have to be designing as a developer, you'd have to be designing as a, developing as a designer, right? But there are also kind of questions that are related to that. Jacqueline is wondering, clients and product managers are used to seeing and approving a perfect high-fidelity final V2 final design. How do you manage the expectations and get their buy-in for this sort of more fluid process?
Yeah. This is definitely something that I encounter very often. I see that it happens all the time. Like people are used to seeing how the website will look, definitely, in the end, and then once they see the end result in the browser, they are like, okay, this doesn't match, but now we're out of budget, for example. There are definitely projects, I guess, where it makes total sense to wireframe and design and create high-fidelity layouts for a lot of the screens. But in the majority of projects, I personally go that route that I design maybe the major few pages, like for example, the homepage. It makes total sense to do a beautiful design of the homepage, show it to the client so that they get a good idea. And one of my recent projects, I did exactly that. I created 2 layouts of exemplary pages, the homepage and one just plain normal template. And we got approval for the design this way, and then we said, okay, now we will build on top of that using a modular approach, using more building structures in the browser to build the design. Although you, of course, need to also manage expectations then. You need to tell them, just like with prototypes, you need to tell them what they are getting so that they don't expect a final design and they're not opening the browser and they are seeing an HTML structure and like, whoa, what is this? This doesn't look like what I am paying you for. Because they might not be able to envision how this design now translates onto that structure that you are just presenting them. But for me personally, it works in projects, working this way. Definitely not by completely skipping Figma and visual design tools. They have their place, but you need to find the areas also for components, for example, where it is really crucial and vital to have something real and graspable, the real material as early as possible in the browser.
Yeah, I think it's also just about really kind of matching or managing expectations, because if you bring that stakeholder early on to show them what you're working on and what it feels like and so on, it's much easier to then get their buy-in instead of having the big reveal moment where you show, this is my masterpiece, please accept it.
Yeah.
Right? Usually this is where you will get into trouble.
And you need to talk to the client as much as possible.
One question that also came up is, so if we move away from static pixel perfect mockups, what does the design deliverable then look like? What does it become? And also how to document and communicate a design that is supposed to be flexible. What would be your thoughts on that?
As I said, design deliverables can still be static layouts, but not sometimes it's really an excessive amount of layouts, right? And you have to go over them again and again and do revision after revision. And it would just reduce the amount of revisions you have to do, the amount of layouts you have to approve, also then reduce the design phase maybe a little bit, but this doesn't mean that designers then don't have to do anything anymore, but they can still work on other projects, maybe work with developers a little bit more. So I guess it might shift a bit, but it doesn't mean that you don't have any deliverables or any static deliverables.
Fair enough. There is a question in Comic Sans. I'm not joking.
Nice.
That's already a statement, I would say.
How was that sent? Oh, okay, it's in the document. Okay, nice. I appreciate the effort.
Yes, the effort of changing.
Thank you.
Jackie is asking, how would you see the ideal workflow? Oh, I cannot read Comic Sans. It's just how would you see the ideal workflow of this developers that design and designers that code? And with all that, there is already a lot to keep up with. How do we learn all these skills without burning out as well?
Yeah, that's really one of the key questions I'm also asking myself a lot of time. I'm working as an independent designer, so I invest also a lot of my spare time into getting my head around CSS stuff, writing stuff on my personal site, building things on the personal site, and I realize that not everyone has the time to do this or wants to do it, or wants to spend the evenings doing this. Also, if you're working for a company, as Anna said, it totally makes sense that there is some time that the company is paying you for personal development, for reading up about the new technology features that you might want to use.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, with this in mind, I think that the church has been very vocal about us finishing. So thank you so much for being with us, Matthias.
Thank you, Vitaly.
Thank you. Thank you.